Hello from Wales, my fellow Shakespeareans. I wanted to do a quick video about Act 2, Scene 4. It starts with Benvolio and Mercutio, and whenever Mercutio is talking, it's going to be very funny, very witty, and very bawdy. It brings up an interesting point. In this scene, they're speaking in prose. In Shakespeare, characters either speak in prose or poetry. And when they're speaking in poetry, it's that iambic pentameter. Did we talk about iambic pentameter? That's the poetic form that Shakespeare chose to write his plays. Most of the writing is in poetry. It's an iambic pentameter, which was the most realistic poetical form available to him at the time. It was the closest to modern day speech, as natural as possible. He kind of gravitated toward being understandable and kind of being simple, believe it or not. But in this scene, they're speaking in prose, and usually when people are speaking in prose, it's a little lower, a little more earthy, a little less erudite. And in this scene, they're very bawdy. So basically, Mercutio and Benvolio are just kind of still looking for Romeo. They're talking about how they, where the heck is he? It's the next day, the next morning. They haven't seen him. They didn't see him all that night, and they couldn't find him. And they haven't found him yet in the morning. And we find out that Tibbled, Benvolio tells Mercutio that Tibbled has sent to Romeo a challenge for a duel, and Benvolio thinks that he's going to answer that Romeo will answer that call, and Mercutio is just like, oh my God, no, Tibbled is a badass, and Tibbled says, alas, poor Romeo, he's already dead, stabbed with a white wench's black eye, run through the ear with a love song, the very pin of his heart cleft with the blind bow boy's butt shaft. And is he a man to encounter Tybalt? So, we could just parse that for a little bit. So he calls Cupid the blind bow boy, and his butt shaft is a arrow that is not sharp, fit for a child, which is fit for Cupid. But I just love describing Cupid's arrow as blind bow boy's butt shaft. And Benvolio says, why? What is Tybalt? And Mercutio basically says, oh, he's a deadly guy. He says, more than the Prince of Cats, I can tell you. Oh, he is the courageous captain of compliments. He fights as you sing a prick song, keeps time, distance, and proportion. He rests his minimum rests, 1, 2, and the third in your bosom. The very butcher of a silk button, a duelist, a gentleman of the very first house, of the first and second cause. Oh, the immortal passado, the punto reverso, the high. Okay, so when normally these pages have, I could show you, so the top of it is what Shakespeare wrote, and then these are the footnotes on the bottom, right? A little bit of footnotes. When Mercutio shows up, the footnotes just go crazy. There's that much footnotes and that much. There's really probably more words here than there are up here. Just trying to explain all the jokes that Mercutio is saying. But basically, I'll just tell you the long and short of it is that he's saying that Tybalt is a better swordsman than Romeo. He's probably a better swordsman than anyone in town. And then Romeo comes in, and Mercutio starts giving him guff, so to speak, and it gets very sexual. I'm not going to go into it all. It's all very complicated. But two things. One, the Elizabethans seem to have had many different nicknames for prostitutes. Take of that what you will. and that Romeo is more than capable of keeping up with Mercutio. They start trading barbs and bantering with each other, and basically Romeo just wins, hands down, and Mercutio's like, okay, enough, I can't keep up with you. And so as witty as Mercutio is, we just find out that Mercutio just likes to show off his wit, whereas Romeo doesn't feel the need to show it off. But when he wants to, he can absolutely keep up with Mercutio. So we come to fall in love with Romeo a little bit more, because as I said before, someone's wit was of paramount importance in the Elizabethan world. Then the nurse comes in, and Mercutio offends her because he's bawdy, and she gets offended, and then Mercutio and Benvolio leave, and Romeo kind of, with his wit and his humble wit, actually calms her down, and they talk about the nurse has been sent by Juliet to find out where they're going to get married, and that was. Let's see, Romeo and Juliet, they talked about it in the scene previous, I think Juliet said, I'll send a servant to you and tell the servant where I should come so that we can get married. And that's why the nurses sought out Romeo. And they say, Romeo says, meet at Friar Lawrence's. He'll marry us, and this is the time to do it. And then they go off. What is also interesting about the scene is that the nurse who works for Juliet's father is more than willing to set up this marriage, which is going to be very problematic for her boss. She's probably going to get fired at least. She might get flogged for this, but she's unconcerned about that, because really she loves Juliet so much. And if Juliet has fallen in love with this boy, and this boy is not a rogue, and during this scene she kind of tests him a little bit to make sure that he's actually a gentleman, and she warns him, don't mess with her, but she's kind of like a mother more than a servant. She's willing to betray her boss to fulfill the dreams of her daughter, of Juliet. And so we come to love the nurse a little more too. I have to say, the beginning of this play, the first scene was a scary one, and it should be a scary one, where the riot you see a riot really start to happen, and right before it gets really bad, the prince comes and stops it. So right away, that's set down as like, we're in a violent world here. But right after that, it's almost like American Graffiti. It's a bunch of teenagers running around, and it's a pretty light play so far. And we're getting charmed by this world, by the characters, and especially by Romeo, and especially by Juliet. Okay, bye.